Okay, so I think we might get started. Welcome everybody to this afternoon's webinar panel session. My name is Melissa Edwards. I'm from the UTS Business School. I'm the Director of the Executive MBA and do research in the area of sustainable enterprise. I'm very pleased to welcome you to this session and acknowledge that wherever you're zooming in from today, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, water and culture as the original custodians. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So we're here today to discuss product stewardship, and as product stewardship means pushing the bounds of responsibility, highlighting our roles as Earth's custodians and ensuring we have ongoing access and ability to utilise materials, resources and energy in the production and consumption for prosperous lifestyles now and for future generations. We know there are many leading companies that have already set the agenda for remanufacturing, designing products to be disassembled or upgraded or built to last. Others for many years have been seeking to reduce waste to landfill and keeping products in use longer by establishing excellent take-back schemes that encourage reuse, remanufacturing or upcycling. And others still have been actively working to educate, advocate for and create conducive policy settings for stewardship across complex global supply chains in Australia and around the world. One of the things that these all have in common is that people are working together, often in unusual partnerships, networks or alliances with people from other industries, other sectors and businesses both up and down their supply chains. And so we wanted to bring people together today from a variety of different backgrounds to touch on some of these aspects of excellence, both in regards to the excellent schemes and initiatives they've been running themselves, but also the ways in which they've worked in these types of unusual partnerships, be it by enticing customers to be part of new leasing arrangements, incentivising suppliers to increase their use of recyclate materials, asking retailers to support product take-back schemes, or even working within their own facilities or supply chains. We're also seeing, and we'll touch on this towards the end, a more positive institutional environment with changing policy from governments at all levels to boost the circular economy in Australia, which has been very exciting for many people. But what does this actually mean in terms of pushing the boundaries for product stewardship in Australia? So we're going to ask our panellists today, what does excellence look like as we sit here, but also what might it look like in years to come? What are the frontiers? So I'm very, very pleased to be joined by our featured panellists, and they're bringing a variety of expertise from their individual company leadership, consulting and education, managing some complex schemes or encouraging other organisations to leverage stewardship opportunities and approaches. I'm going to ask each one of them a series of questions regarding excellence and the next frontier, and then we'll chat along the way. So if you're joining us from wherever you might be in your offices or homes across the country, please use the chat facility today to ask questions as we go to the individual panellists as they speak. And we'll also have some time for Q&A at the end. So if there's anything that you would like to ask towards the end, we'll make a note of those as well. So if everyone's okay, we'll start. And I'd like to first of all invite Helen Lewis to speak. Helen Lewis is principal of Helen Lewis Research. She's had over 25 years in experience in the product stewardship space in various different positions and also in terms of research and education. She's also written several books, including one specifically on product stewardship. And so, Helen, I'd like to start out with a broad question to you. You know, what is the next frontier for us in product stewardship? Where are we heading?
Thanks, Melissa. I love that question. Look, we've had a long history of product stewardship, and I'll confine my comments initially to industry-led collaborative product stewardship schemes. We know product stewardship can be adopted by individual companies or value chains, but I guess most of my experience has been in those collaborative industry take-back and recycling programs. So we've got a long history. We've had the packaging covenant since 1999. Spyro will talk about mobile muster, which is one of our oldest and most excellent schemes. But I think we are, and we've got voluntary schemes, we've got regulated schemes. Most of them are voluntary, however. In terms of where we're going and what the frontiers are, I think we're going to see a lot of activity over the next, 2 to 5 years, driven by quite a few things, driven by the Product Stewardship Investment Fund, with 15 new schemes announced a month or so ago. That's going to really turbocharge a lot of schemes which are just at the very early stage. We've got the Recycling and Waste Reduction Bill, which I think will have more teeth than the previous Product Stewardship Act. And we've got consumers, customers, shareholders, a whole lot of stakeholders really driving more responsibility for products. So where is the frontier? I think there's a few things. I think we do need to build more product stewardship programs for products that aren't addressed at the moment, that are problematic, for which there's no end-of-life solution, or for which recycling rates are very low. But what we don't want to see in Australia is hundreds of schemes, each with trucks driving around the country, each with separate drop-off points, each with their own communication campaigns. It's going to get very difficult and inconvenient for consumers if we go down that road. So I think we need to look much more for opportunities for collaboration between schemes, to build on existing schemes to add more products, or to build alliances where there are common interests. I also do think, and I know this is a very live debate, I think over time we need to build, to add more regulated schemes. Voluntary schemes are good, they're flexible, they're faster, they can be set up very quickly, as some of those schemes that were funded will be. But most of the voluntary schemes, not all of them, but many of them hit a wall with free riders. And I think at a certain point in the development of schemes, there is a need for government intervention. It might just be a light touch. And I think in Australia, we can look at interesting new models. We don't have to follow the highly regulated models that are in place in places like Europe or some of the US states. I think we've got an opportunity to think this through pretty carefully, and it's horses for courses. Some schemes can be voluntary, some might just need nudging from government, and we have seen a willingness from this government to do a lot more nudging, which has been quite effective for things like batteries. But ultimately, I think where voluntary schemes can't get set up on their own, we need to see more backup regulation. So there's just a few things in terms of where I see the future.
Thanks, Helen. And next I'd like to, I know you mentioned Spyro Kalos is joining us here, as head of Mobile Muster. Spyro, I'd like to ask you a question next. You've had over 20 years experience in the telecommunications industry, particularly in the area of e-waste and mobile phone recycling. You're currently the head of product stewardship at the Australian Mobile and Telecommunications Association, managing this Mobile Muster program. So, it's had enduring success. A lot of people may have heard of it already on the call, but, could you tell us from your perspective, what do you think has been the key features that have really made this scheme work?
Thanks Mel, thanks for having me. I think it's interesting when we look at the success of Mobile Muster, it hasn't been an overnight success. The program has been running for 22 years, so it's taken us 22 years to get to where we are today. And Helen talks about, industry participation and free riders. I think one of the successes for us is we have over 90% industry participation within the program. And something I think that's been talked a lot about lately is collaboration. And for us, it's not just about the manufacturers that actually produce this product, but it's also in our fold is the retailers that actually sell the product. So they need to be an active participant in these schemes. The third part of the equation for us is consumers. And as consumers, we need to play a part in the success of these programs. So when products reach the end of life, and certainly in the cases of mobile phones, we don't want people storing them at home. We want them to actively think about what they're doing with that product and actually putting it back for reuse or dropping it off through the Mobile Muster network. The other thing I think for us is when you look at how we manage and run the program, there's 4 fundamental objectives that we sort of work towards. And the first one for us is environmental. So it's about ensuring that the product, when it reaches its end of life, doesn't end up into the general waste stream. But also when we set up this recycling program, we use a single recycling partner. So we've got the ability for transparency, the ability to audit where that product actually goes. And so we can achieve high recovery rates through this process. And I think that's really important for us and certainly for our members. The other piece for us is around social and what role we play in that. And that's about educating consumers on the benefit of, in our case, mobile phone recycling and tackling those barriers. There's a number of barriers, and one of them is actually, data management. And at the moment, I think that's probably exclusive to mobile phones. But I think as technology evolves, we have more smart technology, I think we're going to see that carry over to some of this emerging technology that's actually coming out at the moment. So it's how do we actually play an active role in not just collecting the product and recycling it, but knocking over these barriers and getting more people participating into the scheme. Two more from our perspective: policy. So obviously meeting the objective of our stakeholders, which includes government, but also in delivering a sound scheme for our members. And finally, for us, it is about economic. We're not a commercial program in any way. We're managed as a not-for-profit, but at the end of the day, it's about delivering an effective, equitable and sustainable program for our members. And they're, I guess, the four key objectives that drive the success of the scheme.
Thanks, Spyro. I mean, it's a long-established program and many people will have heard of it. So if we can just pick up on what you were talking about then in terms of, your relationships with many different stakeholders in actually making this scheme to come together. Could you explain to us how those relationships may have changed over time, and if you've seen effects or changes from the perspective of your stakeholders as a result of your scheme in terms of how they've learned or how they come to understand stewardship?
Yeah, I think when you look back to 1998 when the program actually first started, there was the three key players in the market at the time, which was Telstra, Motorola and Nokia, and that landscape in itself has actually changed. So it goes in ebbs and flows. New brands come into the market, and brands leave the market, and that's just the nature of the beast. I think initially for us it was about the manufacturers and it was about the carriers. So those are the two key players that benefited from the program. Over the years, what we've actually seen is more retailers are wanting to play an active role in the scheme. And I think that's driven by consumer awareness and consumer education. I think consumers are actually demanding more of the brands that they buy and also the where they actually purchase. And there is an expectation from consumers that they want to actually be able to recycle the product where they actually purchased it. So for us, we've certainly worked on the idea of making the program as accessible as accessible as possible. I mean, we have an accessibility rate of over 96% of the population is within 10 kilometres of a drop-off point. So again, that's taken 22 years to get to where we are today, and our network continually evolves. And I know it's something that probably we're going to talk a little bit about later on, but the idea of repair. The repair network for us has actually grown significantly. And if you look at that over 2 years ago, we had 20 repair stores registered with the program. We now have over 250. And I think that is simply driven by consumers' change in behaviour and attitudes when it comes to actually managing this product. So, it has been 22 years, and I think that is constantly evolving. I think there is greater expectation from our stakeholders, be it government or be it the manufacturers that produce the product, but also greater pressure on the retailers to be more active in this space.
Thanks, Spyro. And I mean, if I can just pick up on one thing that Helen said in opening, and also if I can repeat the same question to you in terms of the next frontier. Where is the next frontier for product stewardship in Australia? And, is mobile muster the scheme we can apply to all products, including really hard and more difficult to recycle or remanufacture, or products with lower value?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things here. For us, we went carbon neutral recently. We made an announcement that we've gone carbon neutral, and I think we'll see more brands go that way. And for us, it was about giving consumers sustainable choices and options when it comes to actually recycling. At the end of the day, for us, it's about we want consumers to recycle through mobile muster because it is sustainable, it is secure, and we've invested a lot in that message, I guess. I think traditionally product stewardship in this country has always been seen as a collection network, as in collecting product and recycling it. And I think that is certainly shifting and changing, and our program has certainly evolved over the last 22 years because of that. And we are actively encouraging and running campaigns on reuse. We want consumers to reuse that product. If it's got life in it, then again, rather than storing it, reusing it. And we know in this country that our product particularly isn't going into the general waste stream. Consumers are actually storing it, but it is a missed opportunity in terms of the resources that can actually be recovered through recycling. So I think product stewardship will need to involve in, we talk about tackling those barriers when it comes to actually reuse or recycling, because if you don't do that, then consumers are just going to sit and hold on to that product. So I think that's going to be a significant change. And I think what we're also seeing is repair is actually changing. Certainly in the mobile phone space, I think people are recycling more than ever, repairing more than ever before, simply because of the value of the product. And we'll see more and more of that happening. But I think it's a tricky one, especially around that repair piece, because I think mobile phones are more highly valued. I think people are spending more on these devices than ever before. So there is an appetite to, one, extend the life of the device and also have it repaired. Now, you compare that to a $7 toaster, for example, well, then that's probably not viewed in the same light as a mobile phone. For us, next year, certainly we are looking at building a business case to expand the scope of product that's actually collected and recycled through the program, and very much in line with what our members are putting into market. So when you think about the carriers, for example, it's that landline technology. So this is about material and products that aren't actually being collected by any scheme to date. And specifically around e-waste, it doesn't matter if it is a $7 toaster or a $2,000 mobile phone, they are both highly recyclable, and you can actually achieve over 95% recovery rates.
Thanks, Spyro. I love that one. We might be seeing toaster muster.
Maybe.
Yeah, thank you. I'd now like to turn to Aidan Mullan. Aidan, you're the Sustainability Manager at Interface Australia and New Zealand. So Interface, well known as a leading, setting the agenda in terms of many areas of sustainability in product design, but also in new business models. You helped re-engineer the Interface re-entry program in the Australia and New Zealand context. And, through this have pioneered many partnerships in recent times to achieve this ambitious goal that Interface and other companies now are setting around Mission Zero. You've got a fantastic varied background there. You've got some technical skills in terms of chemical engineering, lean, understanding how to bring innovation into the processes, and also the way in which we can address embodied carbon. So I'm really, really fascinated to ask you this question particularly about, what does excellent goals look like? What are excellent goals for companies that are pushing at the edge of product stewardship innovation?
Well, I suppose, Melissa, for us, and I think it's great to hear Helen talking there and Spyro, it's great to know that we're not alone. There's an awful lot happening in this field. And I sort of quote the Ellen MacArthur Foundation when it comes to circular economy as being defined as, it's regenerative by design. And the whole goal is to decouple growth from the consumption of finite materials. And I think that's a great description. But I think it's a little bit limited also, because we have to take in one other element here. It's not just about waste, it's about pollution, it's about climate. So for us, when we talk about circular economy and product stewardship, it's about retaining value, it's about holding on to that product and reusing valuable resource. And when we look at the materials we select to use in our products, we use basically three lenses. Safety of human health and planet. So green chemistry is important. That's the primary lens. But then we follow that through with embodied carbon, because for us, carbon is where it's at now. Nothing wrong with carbon. It's just in all the wrong places at the moment. And really what we're talking about here is taking that back. So we're looking at materials that can sequester carbon in their manufacture. And the third part of the equation, the third lens, is circular economy. Once we lock that carbon into our products, we want to be able to recycle those products back to new product at the end of life, not let it out of our supply chain. And for us, one of the big issues has always been getting the product back, that reverse supply chain. And listen to Spyro there. This is not something you do in the short term. We've been 25 years at this as well. I often think of Amara's law, where when you start out, you sort of short term, you really think you're going to change the world, but then get pleasantly surprised that in the longer term, your expectations were underrated. You can achieve a lot more than you believe. So for us, carbon, circular economy, and that green chemistry are great on material selection, because the waste and the pollution aren't accidents. Again, they're consequences of the decisions we make at the design stage. So for us, design is very, very important. And I like that point of the MacArthur Foundation when they were referred to regenerative design. So we designed for disassembly. We designed the products so we can recover it at later stages. And we've learned that over time, and we've made a lot of mistakes as well. But we feel we've got there. We've got the balance right. And looking forward then, we see one key element in closing that loop for us as ownership, leasing the product as a service. You'll hear that discussed a lot now. And that's the fact that we're actually rolling that out here in Australia at the moment. In fact, we're the first company within the Interface global network to actually introduce the evergreen lease, as it were. So we're piloting that at the moment with the goal of getting our product back end of life. Putting it in a landfill, it's not such a big issue. If we put it in a hole in the ground, we can go back in 400 years and dig it back up again and hope that technology is there to recover this. It doesn't impact that way. It's about a valuable resource and basically disconnecting from petrochemicals as a source of raw material.
Thanks, Aidan. I know we had a bit of a chat about this previously, and the interface being at the cutting edge often means having to forge unusual partnerships and really looking for those partnerships anywhere. So, could you give us some examples of this, of how your interface has really pushed this radical frontier of unusual partnerships for product stewardship? What does it look like?
Well, I suppose initially we set out on our sort of Mission Zero journey, and at that stage we're looking at our own supply chain and very much focused on that. But then you come to the realization that, you can go so far and you can get to the point where, okay, doing no harm is fine, but it's not good enough. So to become regenerative or restorative, you start to look at the palette of materials that you use, and you got to look outside the boundaries of your factory and your supply chain. And I think a prime example, and it's probably it's an exciting example, but quite a low impact, is our networks program, in factly, where we had this contact initially with the Zoological Society of London. They're running a conference, and it's all around the Danajon Bank in the Philippines, a double barrier reef there. The big issue was pollution of nets, discarded fishing nets. Sea stock or fishing stocks had been depleted by overfishing. Communities were there, and Zoological Society of London are working with them to try and find better or more sustainable ways of living. One of our executives at that conference, had the light bulb moment and asked, what are the nets made of? And basically the response was nylon 6. Well, whoopie-doo, nylon 6 is the yarn, the polymer that we use in the yarn for our carpet. So we were able to pull in our supplier, Aquafil, connect those with the Zoological Society of London and the community in the Danajon Bank, and actually recover those nets, clean them up, and ship them across the globe, effectively, to Slovenia, where they've been regenerated into new yarn. So doing something like that is a prime example where it's almost serendipitous. You don't expect it to happen, but sometimes solutions come out of the most unlikely places. I think on the other side of it, networking has been very important for us as well, because we talked about it, sort of fossicking around looking for materials that can be restorative. That's doing it the hard way. And I think, good networks here in Australia, Sustainability Advantage New South Wales has been excellent, Sustainability Victoria, another excellent group. Working with the Department of Industry and Energy, funny enough, we've looked at green power, and gas is 60% of our energy use at our factory in Sydney. It's natural gas. We've been looking for a renewable replacement for that for years. And actually within the next 12 to 18 months, I think we'll be the first factory in Australia working off biomethane, which is a waste to energy recovery system that I believe is really carbon neutral and restorative, as opposed to burning waste to create electricity. So again, that connection came just through networking, just through putting the feelers out. But I think we can do better than that moving forward. And I firmly believe, looking at the future, given the way we can network now through the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, developing databases, there's no reason why we can't have a directory of wastes and flags that say this could be useful for A, B, C, or D. Are you interested? You know, rather than picking up the phone or trying to dream up a solution. I think a database like that in the future will be excellent. And again, with Amara's law, I wouldn't have great expectations early on, because there's lots of databases out there, but they're not networked. And this is the other thing, it's very disconnected at the moment. And I think that connection is the future for us to find better ways of developing our products and making them restorative.
Thanks, Aidan. I love this idea of fossicking at the fringes when we were talking about, and now you've just put this idea in my head now of waste speed.
I'll see you up at the tip, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. So thanks for that, Aidan. Next, I'm going to turn to Rachael Wilkinson. So Rachael, you're a policy advisor at the Australian Industry Group. The Australian Industry Group is a key partner actually at the Centre for Excellence in Product Stewardship that will be launched at the beginning of next year. Rachael, you work in the policy space, so you've been working at the AIG Group since 2017 in a range of topics, including standards, regulation, energy, climate, insurance, and port issues. That's a great broad portfolio. And your current focus is on circular economy and waste, and also bringing SMEs in to the networks around product stewardship, maybe where they're already doing fantastic things, giving them the ability to be able to communicate what it is that, or the great work that they have been doing in the area as well. So Rachael, can you tell us why your members would be interested in product stewardship, and what do you think they can get out of being part of participating in a Centre of Excellence in Product Stewardship?
Yeah, absolutely. So our members are interested for a range of reasons, as you might expect, given all businesses are different. So, you know, in some cases it's being driven by consumer demand. Obviously, customers now are getting a lot more picky. They're actually interested in where their products have come from, the ethics behind it, where they're ending up. Price is a big driver, but there is a growing contingent out there of people who aren't making decisions purely on price anymore, as we might have once seen. There's the regulatory sort of look. So we've got co-reg schemes. The government are getting more involved in this space. They're positioning through the waste bills and other things that have gone on to potentially get involved some more. There is the threat that, you know, if industry can't do better on their own, that perhaps there will be more aggressive regulatory action. So some of it is motivated by a desire to potentially avoid that. There's also the recognition that state and federal government are taking a big interest in this. There's a lot of funding, a lot of grants, a lot of support. So it's a great opportunity for a switched on business to capitalise on that. Additionally, another reason that we're seeing, particularly for our larger corporate players, is they've got pretty serious corporate social responsibility policies in place. And some of those are being driven by investor demand, and some of those are being driven by risk management and even insurance. So what's great about the Centre of Excellence and what attracted us to it is industry friendly, and it's not one size fits all. So it's quite pragmatic in its understanding that, you know, product stewardship schemes are not always the answer. You know, Helen mentioned earlier, we don't want to see a situation where there's a million of them going on in the country, none of them are talking to each other, and we see other sort of negative outcomes. For example, you know, a bunch of things being trucked around inefficiently and creating carbon emissions. So we want to avoid things like that. So, and there are lots of ways you can be a better product steward, including obviously design phase decisions, providing repair options, creating leasing options. And these things might not be an explicit scheme, but they're still examples of good product stewardship. So the Centre recognises that, you know, it's there to support product stewardship in all its forms, in schemes, in better design, in whatever the case may be. So what businesses can gain from being involved, our members and other businesses, is education opportunities, networking opportunities, opportunities for collaboration with each other, connection to an expert panel where that's needed, that they can trust, connection between industry and academia to stimulate more innovation. In some cases, for already successful, active businesses, it might be simply to showcase on a bigger stage their successes. And at its most basic, you know, We just hope people will learn more. If they don't decide to be better product stewards at the outset, at least they'll know what it is in some cases. So those are some of the things that they'll gain there. You know, also noting that some brands just want to be more green. It's a sales opportunity, it's a business opportunity with those decisions being made. It's an opportunity to be more resilient into the future, to have a more sustainable business that is not going to suddenly get the wind knocked out of it by a new regulation they can't handle. And as I said, an opportunity to really take advantage of the support and the grants that are out there now.
Thanks, Rachael. And I mean, is that one of the main reasons why SMEs would start on the journey now? Why is now good timing for like a centre of excellence and creating more awareness around product stewardship, especially with SMEs? Yeah,
with the SMEs. So I think now's as good a time as any. But basically, I think smaller companies can be quite aspirational. So if you look around, most of the big players are engaging in product stewardship to varying degrees. And there's a good reason for that. And a switched on SME could and should look to them for what is best practice, where is the market going. And one example of that would be an AI group member called Pact Group. People on the call may be familiar with it. They're the largest manufacturer of rigid plastic packaging products in Australasia. They're growing in Asia. And they've really assumed a leadership role in trying to address all of the elements in building a circular economy. They don't think it's just about waste management and processing, and they're not just interested in themselves. They want to see SMEs succeed here too, because they recognise that, you know, a supply chain is significant. There's a lot of moving parts here. So, you know, they're a good example of a big player perhaps leading the way for SMEs. And just there is a growing recognition, I think, in terms of the pitch or the value proposition to business, that it's not about being a perfect product steward. I mean, that's the dream, but it's not always attainable. So it's just about being a better one. So I think once SMEs are sort of educated about it, what it is, what the opportunities are, and they understand it's not about solving everything straight away, it's an easier journey for them, because they can simply look at their business and try and find things that they can do better and continually strive to do things better. So, you know, in my view, a key to SME engagement will be showing them that this is a potential additional revenue stream or an opportunity to bolster existing revenue through service fees. It can build customer retention and brand loyalty, because instead of using this old sell a product, have the consumer use the product, have them throw it away and then buy a new one from whoever, maybe you, maybe not you, maybe Australian made, maybe not Australian made. These businesses can potentially keep their customers around via this circular concept and this motion of sort of circularity in the consumption process. So the centre can provide a really good opportunity for those SMEs to learn how to get the best business outcomes from adopting better product stewardship practices and embracing that move to circular economy, and really understanding that there is money to be made or efficiencies to be gained in this process. And again, I've said it before, I'll say it again, there's a lot of really good government support at the moment. I suspect there will be more. And I think that there needs to be an understanding that this is happening. It's not a dream thing. It's here now. It's growing. And if you're late to the party, then some of those incentives, some of those supports, some of that grace period maybe won't be there anymore. So that's another key reason that they would likely consider engaging now.
Thank you so much, Rachael. And it's going to be really exciting, I think, to see how that partnership continues to develop. And for everyone who's on the call, we're referring here, and Rachael's been referring to the Centre for Excellence in Product Stewardship, which is coming through that funding available from the federal government. And my colleagues, I notice, I think one who's on the call here now, and many others who helped shape this panel today, particularly John Getsakis and Rose Reed, Damien Yerko, I think you're there on the call, foundation members as well in setting up this centre. So keep an eye out next year for more news and announcements about that centre in 2021. Thanks, Rachael. Finally, I'd like to call on Patrizia Torelli. Patrizia is the CEO of the Australian Furniture Association, and she's currently responsible for setting the strategic direction and also creating connections globally, which we'll like to discuss as part of the Q&A with Patrizia. The Australian Furniture Association is actually the peak body nationally for furniture and the furnishing industry in Australia, representing over 104,000 Australian businesses and over 420,000 Australians employed across the entire furniture and furnishing supply chain. So also issues around local manufacturers and SMEs are particularly important to the association. So Patrizia, I know you're creating a stewardship approach based on what you call a holistic scheme. I wondered if you might be able to just talk to us about what the key features are of a holistic approach to stewardship.
Absolutely. Thank you, Melissa. And it's really great to see so many of our members on the call today, which is quite rewarding. Look, we are working on a product stewardship scheme, which is very much focused on designing the solution into the design of the product. Our biggest challenge is that products across the furnishing range do contain some of those materials like woods, plastics, textiles, steel, glass, composites, foams. They're all very complex, and there are a number of legislative developments occurring at the moment. I think Aidan picked up on the petrochemicals. PFAS is a massive issue for our industry because it's contained in foam manufacturing. It's also contained in fire retardants and in some of the manufacturing processes. So our desire is to follow Dr. Helen Lewis's lead in not create a whole bunch of stewardship schemes around products, but actually deal with the materials, because those materials may go across many ranges of products and in commercial and residential environs. So you might purchase an office chair right now, because we're all working from home, that would usually be designed for a commercial environment. And we do have some amazing product developers here in Australia who are already adopting take-back schemes and ensuring that the materials that they put into their product ranges can be recycled at the end of life, either be repaired or dismantled, and then those materials reused in other areas. So, you know, end of life solutions for us really are they start at the beginning when we're designing the product. I like to pick up on Spyros's comment about the consumer. We are seeing, and exactly as Rachael pointed out, we are seeing that consumers are becoming more savvy about their selection of products. You know, for many years now, we've been dealing with consumer complaints that are related to the selection of a product that doesn't just not perform as it should, it's not fit for purpose, but it's actually making people sick. And so one of the driving decision-making key points for consumers now are actually the safety of their families. You know, we do have some mandatory standards within our sector, not enough of them, but we do have some, and those are very carefully monitored because people die. You know, put a baby in a cot that's not designed for safety and they will die. But why should we wait until someone dies before actually taking, you know, the leadership role that I know and we know as an industry we can do, very simply too. So we've been discussing this quite extensively with the European Furnishing Industry Confederation, and they do have an amazing circular economy strategy, and we've recently been allowed to enter that realm, which is very exciting for us, because it's not just about seeing, or not just about developing new initiatives, but let's not reinvent the wheel. You know, I've received a couple of packages this week because we're all shopping online for Christmas, and the packaging is actually telling me that it's sustainably made, it's reducing its carbon footprint. I mean, the big brands are spending millions, investing millions of dollars in marketing to the consumer about the environment and the circular economy. I don't think the SMEs really need to go and spend that sort of money, but just follow the lead of those that are going forward, or already leading the way, and pick up on some of those really hot tips. We touched on the button batteries, and whilst it's not so critical in our sector, I know that some of those initiatives don't receive the level of media or consumer attention that they should. You know, we're constantly being updated by the ACEC and the various regulators on childhood deaths surrounding button batteries. So I think that once those types of initiatives do hit the consumer exactly where it needs to, the sweet spot, then we need to model those communication styles for our initiatives and our product stewardship initiatives. So it is a moment in time. I think the international trade wars that are happening at the moment gives us a great opportunity as Australian companies to, you know, design the solution into our product ranges so that when the trade wars are all over, we'll actually be ahead of the pack. We'll already be there. When the legislation is you know, passed through the Senate and through Parliament on the PFAS chemicals, we'll already be there. We'll have already adopted those regimes. When the timber due diligence regulation is enforced in full, we'll already be there because we've designed it into the solution. So that's really where we're heading at the moment. Look at the materials first so that we have an end-of-life solution for the product.
Thank you, Patricia. I mean, you mentioned the ethic there, and I wondered if you could just tell us what can we learn from what's happening in Europe at the moment, particularly for SMEs in helping bring circular economy to their forefront, which might, you know, as you've mentioned, it's quite troubling times for many SMEs.
Well, we've been working very closely with the various governments at federal and state level around government procurement. And we note that one single decision-making process when the business case is being developed for the procurement of products, say for a hospital or an aged care facility or a school, at that point, if the decision-making process includes attention to the circular economy and the end of life of a product, we can actually make some really significant headway just with one fell swoop, basically. Our problem at the moment is that the business case developers aren't fully aware of the standards that exist, the quality of the products that they should be requesting. And the Europeans have developed a materials passport, which we think is really clever. So if there's a project out there that's being specified, the materials have been specified that are fit for purpose, that are safe, that meet all of the standards and are of the highest quality, they can't be switched out of a government project if they have a materials passport stamp on them. So I think that's a clever initiative. I mean, I don't know how many years it might take for us to adopt something like that, but we have to start somewhere. Spyro's been going for 22 years, so I think we've got the energy to do the same.
Thank you so much, Patricia. And thank you all the panelists for the wonderful expertise you've been willing to share with everyone here today on the call, and for giving up your time to be part of the panel. At this stage, I'd like to open up. Unfortunately, attendees, we can't allow you access to speak to us verbally through microphone, but if there are particular questions you would like to pose to our panelists, now's the time for you to post those. You can either use the chat function, we can all see that, or post it in the Q&A. So keep typing. I noticed there was one question that came through, but you've already answered that, Rachael, regarding the Centre of Excellence, which is to be launched next year. So, you know, to everyone again, to please keep your eyes and ears out. But what I might also do at this chance, just while people are having an opportunity to think if they might want to pose a question to the panel, I wondered if the panelists themselves might like to ask one another a question about anything that's been raised so far in the discussion.
Mel, I do have a comment that I'd actually like to make, and when we talk about collaboration, and I think Helen sort of mentioned about, you know, we don't want multiple schemes and how do you share collection networks and so forth. I think one of the challenges, certainly in a country like Australia with such a small population and such a wide amount of space, the cost of actually moving product around is a significant one. And I know from our perspective, our experience shows we've got 3,500 public drop-off points. We've also got a free post-back option. When we are approached about sharing our network or leveraging some of those costs when it comes to logistics, it is a significant barrier for some of the schemes when they're looking at how do they expand their footprint. So, you know, if we can overcome that, and I think there is more work to be done in that space to allow us to effectively get more product back.
Thanks, Spyro. There's a question that's come in here from Holly Chung. And the question is, are we expecting to have working groups established for different products, materials involved in circular economy? Holly, I'm assuming you mean in general terms, not here in this panel today. If that's correct, perhaps I can pose that question to the people on the call here today.
I can have a go. You know, from everything I know, I don't think we're looking at sort of a nationally coordinated thing like that at the moment, although I would say anytime there is like a mandatory scheme proposed, there's almost always stakeholder consultation and working group sort of activity. So I think on something mandated in some way, shape or form, or something official coming through government channels, there would be an equivalence of that sort of consultation. But I don't think there's any planned pathway for every stream at the moment.
I might just add a quick comment. One of the interesting aspects of the Product Stewardship Investment Fund was a huge amount of work that was generated and the huge amount of interest, and we saw lots of new partnerships being developed to address particular product streams or materials. Now, only 15 got funded, and hopefully there'll be another round, and some of those other ones that were close will get over the line. But just from some of the discussions I was involved in, some of that energy was just so good, and there was so much interest. I think some of them will continue on, and from, you know, very obscure little products to major material streams like textiles. I think if there's a particular area that someone's interested in, there's probably some people working on it already, and this is where the Centre of Excellence will be so good to link people that are doing different things. And you may not know that someone's looking at, I don't know, polystyrene foams or a chemical used in furniture that's also in mattresses or whatever. I think there'll be a critical role to link people through that process. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the centre develops.
Yeah,
absolutely, Helen. That's the intention, is to make sure, like, having a central point that knows what's going on around the place. If someone comes with a problem, hopefully we know who's working on a solution and can connect the two.
Yeah,
yeah.
Brilliant.
I would also mention that New South Wales Circular, who are also co-sponsoring this conference we're meeting through today, have set up task forces within New South Wales, and they've got a database of experts currently at the moment, and that may evolve as well. But it's a really great suggestion for creating more visibility. I'm hearing this message around creating more visibility through the Centre of Excellence so that people can find and connect with one another. I've noticed even one of the other comments coming through here on the chat is that extension of an invitation for expertise. So before I get to that one, though, there's a question from Greg Thong, and this is for all panelists, but the idea is, can you tell us how the leasing offers a solution? Perhaps Aidan, you might be able to speak to that first.
Yeah, I suppose this is something that's really been, when we started on our sort of Mission Zero journey, one of the elements of our roadmap was redesigning commerce, and evergreen leasing. That sort of idea of owning the product was there for 20 years now, and it was a difficult one to get across the line. There's a couple of things from a manufacturer's point, because we retain ownership. It means the product is out there, we know where it is, we own it, end of life, we will get that product back. We design our products for a long life, which is very sustainable, but you know, there is a turnover. People change carpet, change flooring, and sometimes they might want to change that on a tenancy basis, depending on the end use. For us, it is great to know where it is, and that means that we can get that back. Whereas in your normal sort of supply chain, we can get carpet out there, it is taken up on a defit, and we might not be able to control getting that back. That could actually go to someone's garage and inevitably end up in landfill. You know, so there's the manufacturing side means we retain the value of the product, the raw materials. Those raw materials are compatible with what we produce. We can use them again in new manufacturing, and that reduces our footprint big time. So that's the advantage for us. And again, it makes us more profitable as well, because you got to be profitable to be sustainable. The second side is that, you know, again, when we look at some of our end users, and you're looking at, say, education, you're looking at big commercial outfits, leasing is not a capex. There's no expenditure required, and then they can put that into their opex, and that's much more attractive for the end user to do that and to use it for a period of time. So that after 1, 2, or 3 years, you know, they can put their hand up and we get that back. But they're leasing it. So the advantages are twofold: both for the manufacturer, retaining value, getting it back end of life, and secondly for the end user, who can then look at it as a sort of an operating cost, I suppose, a capital investment, because that's what carpet is if you buy a chunk of it. And it's, you know, it could be a substantial outlay if you got 3,000-4,000 square meters of office space or school, for instance.
Greg says, thanks for that. Great to see the operating lease is making a comeback.
Melissa, can I just add, could I just add something, Melissa? One of the things that were really highlighted in our process of developing our product stewardship strategy was that the supply chain past our point is absolutely critical. So we have the greatest impact on the charity sector, because furniture tends to get dropped off at, you know, the boxes and the bins that are collected by the charitable organisations, and we're creating a massive issue for them. You know, the risk is significant, not only because a lot of that then does end up in landfill, but we don't actually know what it was used for, and therefore there are health risks associated. So potentially a mattress might be dumped, and that mattress may have been used, I'll use an extreme example now, in a household where someone has had COVID, and then that product is handled by people who do not have the training to be able to handle that product. So I think that part of our solution needs to be really considerate of those handlers of the product by default, that we potentially have no real connection to at the moment. And our focus now is to collaborate with those organisations to ensure that not only are they safe in handling the product, but the product is, you know, disassembled in a safe way and not end up in landfill, creating more issues, health issues.
Thanks, Patrizia. And I think, you know, this idea of quality assurance and safety, particularly with toxic materials or contaminants and other more difficult to handle materials, is something I know, Spyro, you mentioned as well, that as part of a feature of having, you know, one point of recycling in order to be able to ensure quality. What would you like to add anything there in terms of what Patricia's just said around toxic material handling?
Yeah, I guess from our perspective, the integrity of the program goes beyond just the Mobile Muster brand. It's also about the brands that actually sit behind and the brands that actually fund the program. So it's really important for us from a transparency perspective on two fronts. One is ensuring that the integrity of our members is sustained, but also confidence in consumers. So when they recycle with Mobile Muster, they know that we will actually recycle their product. We will actually destroy any data as part of the recycling process. And the material that goes into making that foam will actually be recovered and reused into the manufacturing of new products. I think that is key to the success of any stewardship program. The reason why we choose a single recycler is for that exact that reason, is we can actually audit our recycler and audit their downstream process. So I can tell you when a box is picked up from your local Telstra store exactly what was in that box and what material was actually recovered. And I think that's really important to have that integrity in the running of our program. Absolutely. Thanks,
Spyro. Oh, sorry. Thanks also. Holly's added into the chat here that she was presenting a poster session in the conference yesterday, which was a visual collaborative map to show information and coordinate efforts in this space. And she's very happy to share this work with New South Wales Circular and the Product Stewardship Centre of Excellence in the future. So thanks for that, Holly. Also, there's a question that's just come through here from Enrico Favero. And he would like to know, what are the biggest challenges that are preventing companies to develop product stewardship schemes? Perhaps, Aidan, we might start with you from a company perspective, the biggest challenge.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think the challenge is, you know, you want to make sure that as the end of life solution is probably the biggest challenge, really, and it's what's going to happen to your product end of life. Is it going to end up in landfill? Is it a potential contaminant? So I think I go back again to making sure that at the initial design stage, if you really have to look at your materials that go into your products and say, right, you know, where are these going to end up? How can we prevent them doing any harm to the environment or to human health? And to put your stewardship program around that. And at the very start, it can be very daunting because it can be a very, very big challenge if you don't have a stewardship program in place. So I think this is something you have to do in small steps. And I think, you know, we touched on it earlier in the discussion. Advice is required. So it can be very, I think, daunting for any small company looking at putting a program in place. For Interface, you know, we had a lot of resources to look at what we had in our product, to remove materials of concern, to develop processes for recycling within our own factories, and then to develop the take-back systems themselves. And that took time and resources and quite a bit of time. So I think really that challenge would be not to be feeling under pressure, but to actually take it one step at a time. Eat that elephant in small bites. I think that's the best advice, you know, and get advice on how to develop your stewardship program that will suit your product. You know, I'm not sure if that helps Enrico there with an answer, but certainly that's the approach we took, and it's a long road. It's not a quick fix.
Thanks, Aidan. I'm hearing that same message, and again, probably Spyro, you would say similarly. It's a long road, and getting those brands on board. Is there anything? What would you say is the biggest challenge in getting brands on board?
I think in the start, I think there's this perception that you're working with your competitors, and there's information that you don't want to share with them. But I think the value that a successful product stewardship scheme can actually bring to a brand is highly valuable. And I think to Aidan's point, I think you can start small. You don't have to look at a scheme like Mobile Muster or the NTCRS and think, that's where we have to start. If you think about Mobile Muster, it was 3 brands that came together, and where we are today to over 15 brands that actually participate in the program. So it's okay to start small, and it's okay to start with a small collection network. And over time, I think you will build solid processes, be it your recycling, be it your logistics, or be it even your marketing and communications approach into market. So it's not, anti-competitive with one another. I think brands working together for the better good of the environment can work. And, Mobile Muster shows how that works. And I think also what we've seen certainly over the period of time that we've been operating, our members are now leveraging the Mobile Muster brand and talking about what they're doing, and that's what you want. I think that's where a small scheme can end up. And it does take a lot of work. I'm not going to lie. There's a lot of work that goes in the background to put these schemes together, but it is doable.
Thanks, Spyro. Helen, Rachael, or Patricia, did you want to speak to that one just to finish up? We're almost at time.
I'll just make a very quick comment. I think a lot of these issues used to be seen as a cost, and that's where the barrier was, getting companies over the line for batteries or other things. Now companies are becoming more aware, as Spyro said, that there's a business case here. There's a business benefit. If you're just going to be a hard-nosed business person, we're now seeing a stronger business case.
Go on.
Oh, you go.
Now, we're finding that the companies that have adopted a really good take-back scheme have actually retained their clients and indeed increased their client base because they're offering a value add. It's a great marketing tool. They can, reuse some of the materials, but it's really about retaining those clients, particularly in an environment where the importation of cheap, cheerful products has impacted significantly. This has been the one thing that has helped them to retain their clients.
Yeah, I would concur with everything that's been said, but just to the question in biggest challenges, cost still definitely is one. We've got businesses here with small margins competing with, as Patricia's mentioned, cheaply made product coming in from overseas, and in some cases I think they just feel that it would destroy the margin and they wouldn't exist anymore. There is also the fact that unfortunately in some cases, many cases, a virgin material is a lot cheaper than recycled material, and that adds to the cost and the complexity. There's some regulatory barriers associated with using recycled content, which is an issue for some businesses. Yeah, so really the cost is still a big problem, and there's things we can do, and there's also benefits, as have been mentioned, to just throwing away the idea of cost. Procurement's a good one. So if we could see more, you know, use of sustainable product in government projects, even projects by other businesses in their procurement practices, that would really help. So hopefully we see that cost fall away as time goes on, and as we put the right regulatory and market settings in place to support people who are making cleaner products that are fit a circular model better.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And in the interest of time, I'd like to once again thank each of our fantastic panellists for sharing your expertise and for being able to give your time this afternoon to come together. I think this is an excellent example of the type of sharing of information and knowledge that we need in order to further develop product stewardship and the circular economy here in Australia. I know each one of you has mentioned various different forms of unusual partnerships or enduring relationships that have built up over a really long period of time. And so I think that's a key takeaway here. It's time to start now, and we need to continue this network building going because there is a road ahead. There's lots of support at the moment. And so, you know, once again, everyone here on the call, thank you as well for giving up your time and coming along. I hope we can all stay in touch and look forward to good things that are ahead in 2021. Thank you also to the conference organisers for giving us this platform today and for bringing us all together.